Looking back and smiling, 1,000 years of oath. Chapter 1, Bets. Between the mountains of the Dongjiang River, there is a high-class school called Ziguangfu. The school is known for its rigorous academic style and academic excellence, but the most famous is the famous school grass, Li Zai Yunan. It is rumored that he is as cold as ice, like a god carved in white jade. No matter what the girls' confession, none of them can touch his heart. In the spring of that year, the school's student council held a grand selection gamble, in which the contestants had to take on various challenges, and the winner of the competition was given the privilege of making a request to any of his classmates, which had to be fulfilled by the other student. Every year, the gamble is filled with jokes and quirky stories. However, this year, the life of the heroine Yun Jinyu will be completely changed because of a bet. Yun Jinyu, an ordinary girl from Jiangnan, was famous in school because of her extraordinary talent and determined personality when she first entered the Ziguang mansion, but she had no interest in love. Although every time she heard rumors about Li Zai Yunan, she would feel that the other party was too indifferent, but she never thought that she would have anything to do with such a person. On this day, Yun Jinyu and her roommate, Shen Junli, who is peerless, discussed this year's gambling challenges together. Shen Junli's consistent naughty personality made her quickly put forward her bet, let Yun Jinyu confess to Li Zai Yunan and say it on the spot. This is not only an exciting challenge, but also a test of Yun Jinyu's courage. Jinyu, do you dare to gamble on this? Shen Junli looked at her provocatively. Yun Jinyu was speechless for a moment, feeling that this bet was both ridiculous and funny. If it was based on his usual indifference to Li Zai Yunan, it was really impossible to have any feelings for him. However, if she can win the privilege through this gamble, she can also get many other opportunities. She took a deep breath and smiled, I dare to gamble. However, Yun Jinyu had no real expectations in her heart, she just felt that such a challenge was just a boring prank. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 2, A Confession. When the time for the game came, the student council members in the school had already set up the venue. This time, the venue for the gambling game was chosen in the school's garden, surrounded by verdant lawns and flowering trees, which is said to be the most frequented place by Li Zai Yunan. Yun Jinyu frowned slightly. This challenge seemed simple, but she was a little uneasy in her heart. She walked to the middle of the garden and looked out at the legendary school grass in front of her. Li Zai Yunan was sitting under an ancient tree, flipping through a book in his hand, surrounded by several juniors, but his eyes were indifferent, and he didn't seem to have the slightest interest in the things around him. Yun Jinyu took a deep breath, stepped forward, and stood in front of Li Zai Yunan. Everyone paused, quietly waiting for this dramatic confession. Li Zai Yunan, I'm. Yun Jinyu's tone was slightly uncertain. Li Zai Yunan raised her head, her peach blossom eyes swept over her slightly, revealing a hint of a playful smile, as if looking at a harmless little animal. Are you here to confess? His voice was low, with an unmistakable coldness. Yun Jinyu barely squeezed out a smile and forcibly pulled herself out of the confusion in her heart. Yes, I like you. As soon as the words fell, the people around them let out a slight exclamation. Li Zai Yunan still smiled faintly. His eyes that always made people feel unpredictable were slightly provoked. I'm sorry, I already have someone I like. He said it flatly, as if he had said it countless times. Yun Jinyu's heart was relieved, but she felt a little lost. She lowered her head in self-deprecation, ready to turn away. However, at this moment, Li Zai Yunan's voice sounded again, okay. Yun Jinyu was stunned. She looked up at him, not understanding why he would say that. What? She asked, confused. I agree with your confession. Li Zai Yunan's voice was still indifferent, as if everything was under his control. The surrounding student council members and other spectators were stunned. Yun Jinyu looked at Li Zai Yunan's eyes, her heartbeat suddenly accelerated, and she couldn't understand the reaction of this cold school grass at all. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 3, An Unexpected Invitation. You know, my family has been pushing me to find a girlfriend lately. Li Zai Yunan suddenly said to Yun Jinyu on a moonlit night. They have already started a plan to pretend to be in love, and the two are in the name of dating, but in fact, they are trying to earn extra living expenses and bonuses for his family. Every month, Li Zai Yunan will give her an additional reward of 10,000 yuan. Yun Jinyu was strapped for money at the time, and she was immediately moved and agreed to this request. However, as time goes on, she gradually discovers that she has a subtle affection for this fake relationship. One night, when the moonlight was like water, Li Zai Yunan took her into his arms and whispered in her ear, "Say you love me." Yun Jinyu's heart beat like a drum, and it took a while to respond softly, "Well, I love you." How much love? She paused for a moment, then replied, pretending to be serious, 5,000. The corners of Li Ziyunan's mouth hooked slightly, as if she was secretly laughing at her innocence, but the subtle emotion made her heart ripple. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 4, Love at First Sight. A few days later, when Yoon Jinyu was sorting through Li Ziyunan's old books, she suddenly found an old photo. It was a photo of herself many years ago, and although she was still beautiful at that time, it was not conspicuous, and she was wearing a simple white school uniform, standing in a dense greenery, with a fresh smile. Surprisingly, the focus of this photo is her, and the surrounding scenery looks distantly distant. Yoon Jinyu was stunned, and a wave of incomprehensible emotions surged in her heart. She looked at the photo, and a question suddenly appeared in her mind, is this photo from Li Ziyunan? This. Yoon Jinyu couldn't believe what she saw, and then handed the photo to Li Ziyunan. He glanced at it, a deep glint flashed in his eyes, and then replied indifferently, the first time I saw you, it was then. Yoon Jinyu's heart shook suddenly. She realized that this seemingly accidental love had actually quietly sprouted a long time ago. Li Ziyunan lowered his head, the corners of his mouth rose slightly, revealing a rare tenderness, I've been waiting for you. Chapter 5, Sincerity. Yoon Jinyu still couldn't digest the news. She sat at the table, there was an inexplicable shock and doubt in her heart, all the fake scenes seemed to be suddenly no longer so simple. Her gaze stayed on the photo, and Li Ziyunan's every word stirred up a lot of waves in her heart. You already know me. There was a mixture of disbelief and pain in her tone. Li Ziyunan seemed to have foreseen her reaction, looked at her quietly, and did not rush to answer. That bleak look remained the same, as if he had seen through all her doubts, but he didn't intend to explain too much. Our encounter was predestined long ago. He said softly, his tone still calm, without the slightest fluctuation. Yoon Jinyu raised her head and met his eyes like deep pools, and suddenly, she felt that all this seemed to be no accident. Perhaps, the beginning of all this has been quietly unfolded when she didn't realize it at first. I don't understand. She whispered, her fingers gently caressing the edges of the photo, and the confusion in her heart deepened. Li Ziyunan hooked his lips slightly, and it seemed that he was no longer the indifferent teenager who was on top, but a person who really had a story. His gaze fell on her face, and there was a faint hint of tenderness, which made Yoon Jinyu a little overwhelmed. I didn't fall in love with you at first sight just because of your looks. He spoke suddenly, his tone becoming somewhat unusual. At that time, you were as ordinary as a grain of sand, nothing special, but I couldn't take my eyes off you. Yoon Jinyu's heart beat faster, she had never heard him speak like this. Li Ziyunan has always been indifferent and ruthless, even when she agreed to this pretended relationship, his attitude was still calm, and no one could imagine what he really thought in his heart. Now, in the face of her bewilderment, he finally began to reveal his heart. You didn't know me then, and I noticed you a long time ago. He looked at her deeply, the light in his eyes that seemed to consume her. I've been waiting for an opportunity for you to notice me too. Yoon Jinyu's eyes suddenly turned a little red, and her mood became a little complicated, as if she was hit by a silent tide. But why didn't you tell me earlier? Why wait until now? She couldn't help but ask, her tone revealing a hint of confusion and loss. Li Ziyunan shook his head gently, his expression still calm. I never dared because I knew you wouldn't accept me. At that time, you were so confident and independent, and I was not worth it at all. Yoon Jinyu looked at him quietly, but she felt a little guilty in her heart, because she had never really understood Li Ziyunan's inner world. All she knew was that he was always lonely in a corner, like an indifferent prince, unpredictable, but unable to resist the attraction. But now, she knew what was on his mind, and she understood his hidden emotions. If you had told me earlier, I would have, she paused, suddenly realizing that the words no longer mattered. Perhaps, she should have known that his love had already quietly sprouted before she knew it. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 6, The Distance of the Heart. From that night on, the relationship between Yoon Jinyu and Li Ziyunan began to become delicate. Although they still maintain the appearance of pretending to be in love, there are more invisible bonds between each other. Yoon Jinyu found that she was increasingly unable to isolate herself from him, and the estrangement in her heart gradually dissolved. But this relationship is not so simple. Yoon Jinyu began to realize that Li Ziyunan's world is far more complicated than she imagined. Li Ziyunan comes from a very special family, his parents have very high expectations for him, and they also have a strong attitude towards his marriage. Whenever Yoon Jinyu inadvertently mentioned these things, Li Ziyunan would always become silent unconsciously, and a trace of elusive emotion flashed in his eyes. You don't have to worry. He used to say this to her, his tone was indifferent, but the look in his eyes at that moment made her understand that his heart was not as calm as he appeared. But I'm worried. Yoon Jinyu said softly, there was an indescribable emotion in her heart. I don't want you to make any unnecessary sacrifices for me. Li Ziyunan looked at her, there was a hint of tenderness in his eyes, and then he gradually put a faint smile on his face. If I make a sacrifice for you, it's of my own volition. Yoon Jinyu's heart was shocked, and at this moment, she suddenly realized that she had fallen deeply into this relationship. Chapter 7, The Fate of Fortune. One day, the school held a large-scale campus evening called Spring Breeze Stop, in which the whole school students participated. It's a platform for self-expression, and many people take the opportunity to showcase their talents, and many people take the opportunity to make public confessions. Yoon Jinyu and Li Ziyunan stood in the corner of the stage, staring at the colorful lights and cheers on the stage. Yoon Jinyu's mood was a little complicated. Today, Li Ziyunan's parents came to school, obviously wanting to arrange some of his affairs. It made her feel an invisible pressure. Are you ready? Li Ziyunan asked her suddenly, with a hint of concern in her eyes. Yoon Jinyu smiled slightly, although she was still a little uneasy in her heart. She had already decided that no matter what, she would not back down again. Ready? Her tone was steady, and her gaze was determined. At that moment, she knew that no matter how fate changed, she was already closely tied to Li Ziyunan's heart and could not be separated. Li Ziyunan looked at her, the corners of her mouth rose slightly, and there was a hint of deep love in her eyes. Then, he reached out and gently took her hand. No matter what the future holds, I will be by your side. He whispered, his tone full of tenderness and determination. Yoon Jinyu's heart trembled slightly, and she held his hand as if she was holding the whole world. At this moment, she understood that no matter how many misunderstandings and distances they had experienced, there was a place where their hearts were intertwined. Chapter 8, Finally Married. As time goes by, the relationship between Yoon Jinyu and Li Ziyunan has become more and more stable, and the two are no longer simple pretended lovers, but real love. They no longer need to rely on any external pressure to maintain this relationship, because they have realized from the bottom of their hearts that this love is the arrangement of fate and the sincerity that neither of them can escape. A few years later, when the two stood on the same stage and recalled their original encounter in love, Yoon Jinyu smiled and said, "At that time, you fell in love at first sight, and so am me today." A touch of tenderness flashed in Li Ziyunan's eyes, he bowed his head slightly, and replied softly, "Love at first sight, eventually become a family."